Good morning, everybody. How we doing? Gonna do another little sermon here. It's probably be a little bit shorter, but it's super important. This is gonna be more directed towards the non-believer, but the believer alike. Everyone needs to hear this. There may be I know there's a lot of people out there who, they're calling themselves Christians, but they've just never really truly received the promise of peace that Jesus offers. And so it may be that because of, this form of cultural indoctrination you were brought up in just didn't ever allow you to see the beginning of discipleship accurately, because there's a lot of misinformation and false truth being tossed around surrounding the Bible, and there's all kinds of different sources for that false truth, but in the end it doesn't really matter what the source is, it's just there. And so a lot of people believe things about Jesus that aren't true. But so I'm gonna get into the book of Luke here. I'm not gonna read a ton. I'm just gonna read a few verses really, but both of these verses from a couple of different chapters are going to support what I'm saying about what Jesus says is the beginning path to discipleship. And so let's just read right here in Luke chapter 14. I'll read verse 25 and 26. And this is Jesus literally specifically telling you what the beginning of discipleship is. And I'm going to preface this before I read it, because I'll tell you right now, these verses that I'm going to read are some of the most hated verses in the Bible. And actually, when Jesus said these things, boy, he lost some followers, because it's a tough thing to hear, but it's true. And we talked about that before. A lot of times the truth can be hard to hear because it makes us actually have to get real with ourselves. We have to actually be honest with ourselves. So with that being said, let's get right into it, and we're just going to read a couple verses here from Luke. And there went great multitudes with him, and he turned, Jesus, and said unto them, If any man come to me, and listen carefully, if any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, and yes, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So let's just read that again real quick and hear what he's saying. If any man or person, that's just a generic term, come to me, come to Jesus, if any person comes to Jesus and does not admit to themselves that they hate their father and their mother and their wife and their children and their brothers and their sisters and their own lives, you cannot be Jesus' disciple. Now, what is he saying there? What he's telling people is, if you're incapable of the very base act of personal honesty, you can never go down the path of discipleship. The entire path of discipleship with Jesus is about honesty. It's ridding yourself of a toxic, lying world that's programmed you to lie to other people and yourself. See, we're all born into those lies. And anybody who's been a parent knows you don't have to teach your kids how to lie, they just start doing it. It's unfortunately within all of us. It's a toxic, sinful trait, and anybody who says they have never lied is the biggest liar on this planet. And so right there is your answer. Jesus is telling you, you have to learn to look at these people, the closest people in your lives, the people who carry the most weight and connection, your own family members and your own life. You have to admit the true reality of these people's character. If you're exalting family members to a point where you think they're flawless, like a lot of people do that with their parents, and it's funny because they tend to pick one parent and not the other. Almost nobody says both my parents were fantastic. But a lot of people will say one of my parents was fantastic. But that's not true, because there's nobody on this planet that's truly perfect or capable of raising up a child in the perfect way. It's just not possible. And so what happens in our lives is that we can't ever truly be honest with ourselves because we fail to acknowledge these very base things. That, you know what, I love my parents, but also there are things that they've done or did or do that I really don't like. So you have to acknowledge these type of things. If you don't get honest, you can never be honest. And so then everything that you hear in the Bible, it won't really be received because it's not received from the base level of integrity and honesty. Look, there's things about ourselves that we all wish were different. Lord knows I wish there were things that were different about me. But the way we truly learn to love ourselves, which is counter to the world's wisdom right now, is to first admit that we hate ourselves. There are just things about yourself that you wish were different. Every single person has that. Whether you wish you were better looking, whether you wish you were smarter, whether you wish you were more athletic, whether you wish you were more motivated, whether you wish you didn't sleep as much or slept more, who knows? There's a countless number of things that people are dissatisfied with, but they gloss over these things to the point where somebody will meet you in the street and a friend, they hadn't seen you in a while, say, how you doing? And they'll be like, oh, great, I'm doing great. No, you're not. That's just what you're telling people because you don't want to tell them the truth. This is hard to hear. And if you are really doing great, well, great, say it. But if somebody is not doing great and a person asks them how you're doing, tell them the truth because that's a real human connection. And they might tell you some truth. Maybe you both learn something. See, this is how we ferret out the lies. It's how we actually stop lying to ourselves and figure out how to grow. Because like we talked about before, growth only comes from truth. Lies inhibit growth. For an example, if you're a parent, and you just love little Johnny, oh boy, you love him. And you just want him to be so successful. And little Johnny, boy, he loves basketball. But you know what? Little Johnny's just not very good. But instead of admitting that little Johnny's just not very good at basketball, you make up all these excuses in your head as to why he's not having the success that he ought to. And you pass those lies right on down to the child. And the child learns a pattern of lying behavior from his parent about himself, about the true nature of his capacity for success in one particular area. And it's misguided compassion most of the time that leads to these things. That misguided compassion is the source of almost all the pain we suffer from in this world. Because people's hearts are meant to follow God. He actually said that he would write his law on our hearts, and he has. That's our conscience. And that's why this new modern world, as evil as it is, it's been reproved of sin to a degree like Jesus said it would be, because of that conscience. Because in the old world, in the Old Testament, these people didn't have that. They were capable of doing things that were absolutely disgusting and perverse. Didn't even think about it. And they actually required God to constantly tell him. That's the story of the Hebrew people in the Old Testament. But we have that gift. God wrote our conscience on our hearts. And that conscience is trying to get you to stop lying. Stop lying to yourself. Just going to go to another verse in Luke here, and this is relating to families, and it's going to just go along a little bit more with what I'm saying. So we'll just flip here to Luke chapter 9. I'm going to read Luke 9, verse 60. Let me get my glasses on here. Jesus said unto him, well, let me back up. Verse 59. And he said unto another, follow me. But he said, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. And Jesus said unto him, let the dead bury their dead. But go you and preach the kingdom of God. So, understand what he's saying there. Is that Jesus is saying those people who aren't following him, they're already dead. And so what he's telling you, and this is where Jesus lost a ton of followers, is that serving Jesus and serving God comes before serving your own family. And the way that you can truly serve your family is to be honest with them. Be honest with yourself and do what's right. And sometimes that will cause friction. But a lot of times that friction is what's necessary to make a fire in someone else. It's just the way Jesus works. He purifies with fire. And a lot of people don't like fire in their life because it's hot and it burns. But remember, the path is narrow. It's not wide. And so, if you want to start seeing real change in your life, real peace in the storm, real happiness, you have to start being honest with yourself. You know, there's a lot of people, this is just one thing that pops out to my mind. It's just something that just, I don't know why I think about this, but a lot of people, they think they're like a leader or something. They want to lead people, you know, but nobody follows them. If nobody ever follows you, why would you think you had the capacity for leadership? It's because you're lying to yourself. You're trying to be somebody you're not because your ego wants to feel important. And that plays out 1,000,000 times over in every single one of our lives. Our egos will lie to us in that way because they want us to be things we're not. But we'll never be what we're not unless we're born again. So that's the amazing thing, is you can truly be born again. You can choose that path, but the path comes by honesty. You're going to have to get with yourself. You're going to have to look inward. Stop looking externally for validation. Look inward and start getting honest with yourself. Start truly evaluating your own behavior. And not just yours. Think about the behavior of the people you may have put on a pedestal because of a childish thought process. You know, when we're children, our parents raise us up, and we respect them for that. We take care of them. We do for them, even if we weren't so happy with the childhood they provided us, because that's what God commands us to do. But pretending that one parent or both parents were these people that were somehow worthy of, you know, following everything they do as a model for your own parenting of your own children, that's pure wickedness. The only parent that gets it right is God. And that's why He's our Father. That's how we're born again into Him. So the only way to raise yourself up from childhood to adulthood in God's eyes, and raise your children up from childhood to adulthood in God's eyes is through faith in Jesus, integrity, and honesty. Not telling people what they want to hear so they'll be your friend. Not telling people what they want to hear just so they won't dislike you. Not telling your children they're amazing at things when they're not. That's wrong. One of the worst offenses any parent could ever bring to their child, ever, is to routinely build them up for something they're just not that good at. That's a disgusting perversity. It comes from the ego of a parent. They're not honest with themselves. Because no parent wants to say, boy, I wish my child was a little bit more talented. Of course nobody wants to say that. But guess what? We're not all the same. And you will hurt your child more by praising them in that way than you'll ever hurt them by not praising them. An overabundance of praise will set up a false reality for people. And it all comes from lies. So I'm just calling to non-believers in particular today. If you have found yourself lying to yourself all the time and pretending you're happy and posting little memes on Facebook that oscillate between enlightenment and I don't have my stuff together, the opportunity's here. It's right here. Jesus wrote a personal letter to us. It's the guidebook for our life. And if you follow it sincerely, you will have peace in the storm. Your life won't be without fire, because the fire is part of the process. That's how you get refined. That's how you become a productive branch. You have to be purged in order for that fruit to be born on the branch. And that fire gets hot, but it's worth it. So I'll go back to my favorite book in the Bible. And you'll probably guess why. The book of Daniel. When I was a little boy, it was always my favorite book. I loved the story of Daniel in the lion's den. But that story is actually about truth in the fire. Daniel was standing up for truth. And he went through that fire to be purged of any impurity. That made him a perfect vessel, fit for the kingdom. God could see his own image in Daniel when he looked there. Another great thing I'll just mention real quick about that story is, now that I'm an older guy and I've studied the Bible a lot, I love it. It's a wonderful appearance. Jesus, literally one looking like the Son of God, appears right in the midst of that fire. Written about 500 years before Jesus walked the earth. The Son of God. It's an amazing thing. So anyway, we'll just leave it there, and I'm going to direct everybody to think about those verses in Luke that I just read. Think about that. How often have you lied to yourself because the truth hurt? But those lies, they build on each other, and they end up hurting way more than the truth. So let's just have everyone live in that truth with ourselves, with others. Be willing to look at the people closest to you honestly. That doesn't mean you have to attack them. But sometimes real conversations are necessary. And sometimes those real conversations aren't easy. But conversation is communication. And that's the only way we can get beyond a lot of things. Hope everybody has a great day.